so much for joining me in my studio. Today I'm going to be working on another one of my Bob Ross inspired landscapes. I'm going to be using my Caran Neocolor 2 water-soluble wax pastels, and I'm also going to be using some colored pencils towards the end just to add some finer details. As I said, this is inspired by the style of Bob Ross. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I'm Kathleen. I'm a teacher and an artist, and at the beginning of the year, I started a 30-day Bob Ross inspired challenge where I had gotten a daily calendar for Christmas, and every day was a different Bob Ross painting. And so you can check my channel, and I have a lot of videos where I actually took a Bob Ross painting and I used that as my inspiration. This is not based on a Bob Ross painting. This is a reference photo that I found, and I'm just doing it in the Bob Ross style. One of the things I really love about the Caran Neocolor wax pastels, which are basically an artist grade quality wax crayon that is, once you add water to it, it dissolves and you can use it just like you would a regular watercolor paint. I find that they're very versatile, they're easy to use, they don't make a lot of mess, they're easy to clean up. And so when you want to sit down and just start creating, I think they work really well for that, and they're fun to play with and experiment with. And so one of the first ways you can use the wax pastels, the water-soluble ones, is you can just color on your page or do a pre-sketch first, which is what I did here. And then you take either a watercolor brush with some water, or you could use, this is an actual water brush, so there's water in the handle. So I just squeeze the water out, and that activates the color on the paper. The second way you can use the wax pastels is you can take your wet brush and apply it right to the crayon and pick up the color, and then just use it like you would any kind of regular watercolor paint. I do this when my paper is still wet and I want to get a wet on wet type of technique. If I had taken my crayon and drawn directly on the wet page, which is something, a third way that you can use the crayons, it would actually give me a heavier line than the lines that you saw when I first started drawing. And I don't really love that technique so much, but it is one that you can use. I'm switching to I started with the blue for the sky, and then I did add I'm adding some gray to the mountains. And I don't even have to worry about cleaning my brush in between. You can just squeeze the water and wipe it on a paper towel if you need to change colors, and you don't even have to have any water next to you. So the water brushes are really fun because I feel like they make my painting a little more spontaneous, but they're also really easy to travel with. You don't have to worry about taking water with you, and you just have to make sure that you have enough water in your brush, and then you just fill it up when it's empty. So I'm doing the same process here where I'm taking the paint directly from the tip of my crayon. I switched to a green, and as you can tell, my style is very loose, very expressive, and I like to just kind of tap my brush, and I'm not going for really super hyper realism here. I'm just going for a really impressionist style. So I'm just moving my brush around and tapping it to create just the impression of some trees. And because this is an autumn painting, I want to add some autumn leaves, and so I'm adding some yellow. I'm going to be picking up some orange, and my paper at the bottom corner is dry. So when your paper is wet and you take color and add it to the wet paper, the color will spread out a little bit, and you can kind of see that there. When I went back over my yellow, you can see the yellow is really expanding out and diluting, whereas if you take your wet paint and put it on dry paper, you're not going to get that. My color was a little heavy, so I picked it up with a paper towel, and that's another technique you can do, and that is called lifting. And again, I'm just going to go back and add some darker values and just, try to start building my layers. With the Neocolor 2, I don't like to start real heavy. There's some really great artists on YouTube that use Neocolor 2. One of my favorite is, her name is Katie Moody. Her style is quite a bit different than mine. I love the effects that she gets, but I think that she goes with the heavier use of the crayon. I start really light, and I really like to build my layers. And you can see up close here now, when I add that green to the wet background, that green is diffusing and bleeding out a little bit. So this close-up version is a little bit easier for you to see how that works. If you're new to my channel, thank you so much for joining me. Like I said, my name's Kathleen, and I'm a teacher and an artist. And right now I work with aging adults in a senior living community. And so most of my tutorials that I do here on YouTube are really simple ones that anyone can do. They're easy to follow along with, and they're fun and relaxing. So what I switched to now is I'm using the Prismacolor colored pencil. So these are not water-based. They're not gonna activate when I add water to them, and I'm just adding some finer details, some tree trunks and tree branches, and I'm just adding some shadows around some of underneath my trees and on my hillside. And I switched to a green. I had started with the brown, but now I'm gonna add a little bit more detail to the tree line that's on the hill or the little mountain there. And again, I'm not going for realism. I'm just going for the impression of pine trees that are sort of off in the distance. And the farther away you get from something, the more fuzzy it's going to be. So that's a technique called environmental perspective, where the things that are closer up would have more detail, but things that are farther away, like the trees, are going to be a little more fuzzy and a little more blurry. And so that's why I'm doing this in a real loose and expressive and impressionist type of style. I added some orange to my trees, and now I'm just adding some lines to the mountain range. And I just really love to squiggle the pencil around and try to add some texture and some different color. And it really adds to the layering and makes the mountains a little bit more interesting. I added some blue. I did go back and add a little bit of gray directly from my crayon to make the mountains just a little bit darker. And again, I'm lifting. I do that quite often, where I'll put some color down. It'll be a little too heavy. I'll pick it up with a paper towel, and it gives you some really nice effects. I'm not totally lifting all the color. Now I'm back to adding, this is a red color that I'm picking up off the crayon, and I'm just adding a little more detail to the trees. One of the other ways you can use the Caran Neocolor crayon is you can color on a palette, which I have a plastic palette that I just scribbled some color on. You can activate it with water and then just use it like a regular watercolor palette. And that's a really fun way to use the Neocolor too, because then you can mix colors together that you might not have. So once that's dry, I did come back in with a lighter green. I'm adding some details and some highlights in some different areas, and I'm just experimenting. And at this point, I'm just, trying to enjoy the process, not worry too much about what the end result is going to look like, but just enjoying working with the color. It's a very therapeutic. I usually put on some nice soft classical music, and it's just a really relaxing process for me. I'm adding some yellow just to the back of the trees, just to give the impression of some more autumn trees that are changing color in the back. And that's pretty much it. So I hope you enjoyed my process. Thank you so much for watching. I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel for more videos like this.